Thank you, Hannah. Thanks very much for joining us today and for taking the time to chat with me.
Good to be here.
Good. I wanted to start by asking you, we're at this very lively event here at Sustainability Week. How have you found the event so far? If there was one key takeaway, can you share something?
Yeah, so it's actually bigger than I thought. So it's nice to it's nice to meet up with people that are in the same field as you are. If I should take one thing away, it was someone said on the previous panel, the future is not what we see it or how we've seen it so far. So I think we're in this kind of time now where we have some short-termism, we have some long-term work that we're doing. So how do we navigate? And I think it's nice to talk to people about how we do this as a community also.
Yeah, and learn from everyone in the same space. Yeah, that's great. I think that's a good point you mentioned on short versus long term. How do you have the right mix of both? Because you can't achieve something in the long term unless you have a short-term focus on it as well.
Correct.
Which brings us to my next question. As you know, we're celebrating 10 years of Sustainability Week.
Yeah.
So it's been a decade. And if I'm thinking long term now, looking ahead for the next 10 years, where do you think we should be focusing our efforts?
So I think we are on a period now where it's a lot about implementation and taking action, and I think it needs to continue to be so. I really think it's, targets are good, but when it comes down to it, it's about making things happen. So how do we get the right policies that really drive this change that we need? But also how do we as businesses really turn our targets into strategies and interaction? And I think that still will be the theme for years to come.
Yeah.
I also think there's something now about, certainly when I look at our business, we've been very climate focused. But I think we're learning more and more that climate, nature, biodiversity, health, there are so many topics that work together. And we also need to, I think, understand more the sort of more holistic approach that we also need to gradually take as politicians, companies, all the actors in this. Yeah.
That's a good point, the interconnectedness of these different topics and areas of focus. That's a really good point. And I think events like this help with
for sure
bringing that to the fore.
Yes.
And you said something about, we need to have the right policy, we need to have business leaders. Between now and maybe if I'm thinking about the end of the year, so COP30 in Brazil, what do you think business leaders need to prioritize in order to keep sustainability a global priority?
So I think right now it's, there is a bit of shortism around us, particularly when you're sitting here in Europe. It's getting interesting. So I think, making sure that we understand both the benefit of our work for climate and our planet, but also, the benefit that the work can also have on the economic performance of businesses. So I think we need to go back and sort of make really sure that we focus on the work that benefit both. And I think we still have a lot there we can do that can both benefit businesses but also benefit climate. Right?
Climate and society as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of that, something that is a win-win-win, if you will, what is one thing, area, technology, idea, approach that holds the biggest promise for you in your sector?
So I think if you look at the technology in our sector, then a big one for us is this whole, how do we attack methane, for example, and feed additives that are coming in are getting approved is of course something that's big for us to move through. In approach, I'm a big believer that we need to get the incentives right.
Oh, good, yes.
And we need to get them right for everyone. And that's about policies and the way we work as companies.
That's a good point. Incentives are so critical. I do want to come back and explore a little bit more on incentives and also technology. But obviously, you work in the dairy space, and it would be something I would need to address and talk about, which is, dairy's faced a lot of backlash recently, right? We know it plays a big, important role in global nutrition, but of course it also has an impact on the environment. You talked about methane, which is a critical pathway for that impact. But how do you see the role of dairy evolving to make it much more sustainable and support a more resilient food system?
So I think we're talking about food. The world is hungry. I think dairy has a huge power there. So when you look at that, and the numbers are big, that we have 2.3 billion people that suffer from some food insecurity or malnutrition. We know that we have a very powerful product because of the density of the nutrition in dairy, because of the availability of it, because it's affordable, and we need to produce it more sustainable so that we can provide that nutrition. And I think that's the job to do in our sector. So. And I also think we have a responsibility to really help people understand how critical dairy is for nutrition. And fortunately, people are also starting to talk more about that now, which is good.
Yeah. Education is always critical.
100%. 100%. And I think when you look at the recent work of the FAO, the way that they frame our challenge for 2050 is to enable everyone to eat a healthy diet. And for that to happen, we have to work with our eating habits. We have to make food available to those that don't have it, and we have to make it sustainable. And I think that's where we should start, is how do we provide everyone with a healthy diet that's made in a sustainable way.
Yeah, I think you hit the key issue here, which is it's not so much, should we have it or not? It's not an absolute. It's about how do we have it in the most sustainable way.
Correct.
In order for us to be able to solve this challenge.
Correct.
And you alluded very quickly to technologies. I'd love to go deeper into that. We know that there are a lot of innovation, and there's lots of innovation and lots of technology. Like when we think about carbon sequestration or methane reduction in the livestock space. So if I'm thinking about the dairy industry, how can we think about how livestock and dairy can be a part of the climate solution instead of the problem?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we need to have is we need to have good data, and obviously that goes for all sectors, but it also goes for dairy. We started this in Arla 15 years ago or so. How do we measure climate at farm level so that you give every farmer a tool to work with? So I think that's where it all starts, is we need data. Once we've got that, then you need to put in the right incentives so that a farmer can see how am I doing, and what can I do, and what's the benefit for me if I do that, not just to climate, but also to my bottom line on farm.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of combine at farm level the economy of that farm and the climate impact.
You mentioned incentives. I'm really keen to dive deeper into incentives. Could you share a little bit about what some of those market-based incentives or policy incentives that you think are working in this space right now? I think the most important is that we align the incentives that farmers need to act on. In Arla Foods we have our own incentive, which means that just under 10% of the milk price that farmers get is dependent on how much action they take on climate. And that's decided by our farmer board. It's them putting their money where their mouth is. Now, of course, what's important for us is that other incentives are working and accelerating the work we do. So we work with the financial sector, for example, and some of our
actors that finance our farms are taking our incentive and putting money behind it to accelerate it further. We also work a lot with governments to make sure that the policies that they develop are not getting in the way of the incentives that we have created, but hopefully accelerating them even further. And I think that's, we need to make life simple for farmers, and therefore we need to take it upon us to tidy things up so that the incentives that they need, either from policies or from us as a buyer of their milk, are aligned. And it's clear what action they need to do to benefit from all of it.
Yeah, you made a really good point, which is that it has to be beneficial to the environment, has to be beneficial to the farmer, and we want to decomplex this situation,
Completely.
right? It becomes very difficult to execute on something if it's too complex. And I think that's an interesting point, because it's not like, and you said the farmer board, they set this up themselves, and so you want to be able to act on it. But sometimes these practices, even though the intention is good and farmers want to act on it, there are some challenges, whether it's financial, technical, other regulatory challenges. So I know we talked about financial and technical and even regulation from your side, but what are some of those solutions that are providing most effective from the farmer perspective in executing on these?
So maybe I should just say that, because not everyone might not know, that the company that I work for, Arla Foods, is a farmer-owned cooperative. So when I say the farmer board has decided, it's our owners and our suppliers, of course. I think what we have learned in terms of how you make this change happen, in terms of how farmers work with this, actually, one of the things we learned along the way is that the person a farmer trusts the most is another farmer.
Yes.
So one of the things that we also try and do is to bring the farmers together in small groups so that they can learn from each other. It might sound a simple thing, but I think it is actually quite important that we understand where they can take inspiration from to act. So that's one thing that we've certainly seen is very beneficial. And then I think there are a lot of advisors around farmers, and they also need to be on the same agenda so that things are simple.
Yeah.
I think for us, what has then been key is that we have our customers with us, because when farmers see that this is something that the market is also asking for, that builds their confidence in that if I act, it's going to be for the long term, because my market is with me. And that's why we have built this program. We call it our Farmer Hat program. And it starts with the data and the incentive, as I talked about earlier. But what we have now added is what we call Farmer Hat customer partnerships. And the customer partnerships mean that we can transfer the benefits of the work that our farmers do through data to our customers, so they can count it in their reductions, because they have science-based targets like we have. And then they financially reward us back, which we can then move out to farmers. So there is money going one way and reductions and benefits going the other way. And I think that can be the role of our value chains in this transition, is that we can get that flow going, which is, and we need to get it going at scale, which is what we have been working on in Arla.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. What are the learnings from other sectors, or how can you share some of your learnings from this sector, to other other areas of the ag and food supply chain as
For
well.
sure.
All right, last question, because I know I've taken my time because it's such an interesting and insightful conversation. But you mentioned, I know we talked about farmers, we talked about you as the farmer-owned cooperatives. But if I'm sort of scaling up a little and taking a slightly broader view, we also talked about collaboration, right? So how are you thinking about multi-stakeholder collaboration, and where have you seen some of this work best?
So I think we have a responsibility as actors in our sectors to try and bring as many companies in our sector with us as possible. Something that we've done is we are openly saying we'll share our tools for anybody else that works in our sector who can use them to go faster. We've seen that being taken up by a lot of, or the whole sector actually in Denmark. So the smaller companies are taking our tools and then moving. So I think that's nice. I think the other thing is that we need to take responsibility for working with our, policy makers. We need to share the learnings that we have with them so that we can help develop the implementation of policies. So that working together between policymakers and companies, I think, is also very important because we are dependent on funding. We are dependent on government funding also. And I think those programs need to be very well implemented for farmers to lean into them. And I think we can help with the implementation part to share our learnings of how we implement with them also. And then maybe if I should mention a third thing, I think also globally. So in our sector, we have something we call Global Dairy Platform. So this is the big dairy companies globally, where we work together also. And I think what we can do there is to share some of the roadmap that we work with in Europe. There is a lot of that roadmap that's also relevant if you're a farmer in Africa or in India or in China or anywhere. So how do we transfer the knowledge to farmers in those regions that might not have the resource or not be as organized as we are in our cooperatives. So how do we transfer? And we actually in there have an MOU with FAO where we work with 10 countries globally to try and transfer knowledge into national roadmaps for those countries.
Would you say, though, the knowledge transfer, especially if you're thinking about farms in Denmark versus farms in Africa or India, do you think that there is a comparison there? Are they very different? Do you think you have to tweak a lot of the tools to suit the local context?
So what we call, good farmingship kind of thing. So, the efficiencies, so producing high quality feed, the way that you feed your cows so you don't underfeed and overfeed. We all call of that feed efficiency, fertilizer use, not too much, not too little, all of this. What we see is that a lot of those KPIs can be transferred. Of course, the conditions are different, the climate is different, all of that needs to be adapted. But a lot of the KPIs can be transferred. We in Arla have built a farm in partnership with the local government in Nigeria, for example, to also help with the education of the local communities there, so that they can see what good can look like,
what is possible,
what can look like, and what is possible.
Yeah.
So if you look at the global footprint for dairy, 80% of that emission sits in developing countries. So we can address a lot where we are, but there is even more to be gained if we can support some of those farmers in developing countries.
That's a really good note, Hanne, to end on. I think that we all have a responsibility,
yes,
and there is a need for global collaboration
yes,
on this in order for us to address this, because it's not a country problem, it's a global problem.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
But thank you very much, Hanne. I really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.